Sundays in 1950s America. When my memories take me back to the years long past, the clearest images that appear are not of faraway trips or bustling events, but of gentle Sunday mornings in a small town. In those days, Sunday was a special day, not only because it marked a time of rest, but because it carried its own pace of life, slow and warm, as if the whole town had agreed to take a deep breath together and release it in peaceful harmony. The early spring sunlight was often as soft as a sheer veil draped across the bedroom window. Sparrows chirped outside the white picket fence, heralding the start of a new day. My mother was always up early, the scent of freshly brewed coffee rising from the kitchen and blending with the aroma of warm baked goods. My father sat at the breakfast table, crisp white shirt already ironed, holding the morning paper and occasionally turning a page with a soft rustle. No one was in a hurry. The whole family ate breakfast together, usually fried eggs, bacon, and buttered toast, while chatting about the small happenings of the past week. When the wall clock struck 8:30, we began getting ready for church. Dressing neatly on Sunday was second nature to us. Mother wore a pale blue dress, pinned with a silver flower brooch she especially cherished. Father put on a gray suit with a striped tie. My sister and I had our hair neatly brushed by Mother. She wore a white flared dress, while I had on a collared shirt and trousers. A faint trace of Mother's perfume lingered in the air as she gave us one last inspection before we left. The walk to church took about 15 minutes, but it felt like a familiar journey intertwined with childhood. The main street was quieter than usual, with only the sound of shoes tapping softly on the sidewalk and the distant chime of church bells. A few other families were on their way too, exchanging warm greetings as we passed. Inside, the air was cool and fresh, and sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting gentle colors across the pews. The organ played slowly, deeply. People found their seats on the long wooden benches, exchanging soft hellos before the service began. The priest's voice was steady and warm, pausing now and then for the congregation to join in song. For a child, sitting still through the entire service was not always easy. But I remember the feeling of safety, sitting between my parents, the soft light falling on the open pages of the Bible, and the soaring hymns that seemed to lift the spirit itself. When the service ended, the bells rang again, and everyone slowly rose and made their way to the churchyard. Short conversations were exchanged, laughter broke out here and there, and children darted around under the trees. We often lingered for a few minutes before heading home. Mother would chat with our neighbor about a new pie recipe, while Father shook hands with old friends. My sister and I stood by, half listening, half kicking pebbles along the path. Everything moved slowly, but no one felt bored. That was Sunday, a day to connect, to share, and to feel like you truly belonged to this place. Returning home, the sun was already high, casting a golden glow across the wooden porch. From the kitchen came aromas hinting that lunch was being prepared. In my mind, the time between returning from church and sitting down at the table was always one of the most pleasant moments. There was no rush, no worry, just the sound of Mother and Grandma talking in the kitchen, the rhythmic chop of a knife on the cutting board, and the gentle country music drifting from a small radio. Sunday lunch in the 1950s was always a true family occasion. By the time we returned from church, the kitchen was already filled with the mouth-watering aroma of roasted meat, creamy mashed potatoes, and hot gravy. Mother busied herself at the oven, stirring the sauce, while Grandma chopped salad greens and set each plate carefully on the table. Father would pour himself a glass of iced tea, then sit by the window finishing the morning paper while waiting for everything to be ready. On the table, everything was neatly arranged. A white tablecloth with tiny floral patterns, silverware polished to a shine, and in the center, a plate of freshly baked bread releasing its sweet, warm fragrance. Once everyone was seated, Father would open with a simple but heartfelt word of thanks, and then we began to eat. The roast was tender, the mashed potatoes rich and smooth, and the buttered green beans passed from hand to hand. Stories from the week were shared, news from school, updates on the crops, or sometimes amusing tidbits about the neighbors. No one hurried through their meal, and there were no interruptions from telephones or television. Only the gentle clink of silverware, my sister's laughter, and the breeze whispering through the curtains. When lunch ended, Mother brought out the dessert we had all been waiting for, a golden apple pie with a crisp crust, soft sweet filling, and the warm scent of cinnamon. We ate it with a scoop of cool vanilla ice cream. That dessert was almost a Sunday symbol, a sweet full stop before the quiet afternoon. Sunday afternoons were often a time for rest. Father would pull his armchair onto the porch to read or nap. Mother and Grandma might mend a few shirts or embroider handkerchiefs. My sister and I would do puzzles or play tag in the backyard with neighborhood friends. On nice days, we sometimes turned on the radio to enjoy a live concert or a comedy program. But some Sundays were special when my parents decided the whole family would go to the supermarket or the big department store. In those days, shopping was not just about buying things, it was an experience. The supermarket was spacious, brightly lit, and full of goods. We strolled slowly down each aisle, admiring cereal boxes with colorful illustrations, neat rows of milk bottles in the chilled section, and a candy counter that felt like a treasure chest of sweetness. If that day's outing was to the department store downtown, the feeling was even more special. The moment we stepped inside, the fragrance from the cosmetics counter floated in the air, and light reflected off the large mirrors, making the space feel grander. I always hoped we would pass the toy department, where dolls in glass cases and model train sets waited for a small pair of hands to hold them. My parents rarely bought much, but they let us choose one small item, perhaps a comic book, a packet of candy, or a rubber ball. Holding that new treasure as we stepped out into the Sunday afternoon air was a simple but deep joy. Those outings were also tied to household objects that have now disappeared. I remember the rotary phone in the living room corner, with its long coiled cord we often twisted while calling friends. I remember the milk box on the porch, where the milkman would leave glass bottles full of fresh milk each morning. And I remember the old icebox, the forerunner of the modern refrigerator, where Mother stored meat and fish on large blocks of ice replaced weekly. These objects did not just serve daily needs, they were part of our memories. They carried the mark of a time when everything was handmade, sturdy, and simple, tied to a slower, closer way of living. Now, looking back, I realize that Sundays in the 1950s were more than just a day off. They were threads that bound the family together, a time when everyone put work aside to listen to one another and be fully present. There were no constantly ringing phones, no pressure to check messages or emails, and no suffocating schedules. There were mornings that began with church bells and golden light on the small-town streets, family lunches made with love and patience, quiet afternoons when the breeze carried the scent of flowers onto the porch and the radio played softly in the living room, trips to the supermarket or department store, not just to shop, but to meet neighbors and feel the gentle rhythm of a town where everyone knew each other's name. I still remember clearly the feeling of ending a Sunday, the sky washed in sunset colors, slow footsteps on the way home, and a quiet peace settling in my heart. Everything felt in its right place, ready for a new week to begin with lightness and hope. Today, much has changed. Those old household items are gone, and old habits have been replaced by modern technology and speed. But the memory of those Sundays remains, as vivid as the scent of warm apple pie, the chime of church bells, and the warm gaze of loved ones across the table. We may not be able to return to that time, but we can still keep a bit of that old rhythm for ourselves, setting aside a day truly to rest, to eat together, to talk without interruptions, to remind ourselves that happiness can be as simple as being together in a home filled with laughter and the aroma of a shared meal. Because in the end, what lingers in memory is not the things we bought, but the moments we lived, slowly, fully, and with love.